Arrest him! HOA President Brenda Whitmore shrieked, pointing her manicured finger at me as 3 Pennsylvania State Police cruisers turned my gravel driveway into a light show. All because I bought Old Mill Lake and locked out their little yacht club. Neighbors spilled from their brick colonials clutching coffee mugs watching this suburban nightmare unfold. She's ranting about stolen community property and her pristine tennis whites standing on land I legally own with my hard-earned military settlement. But Brenda just made a fatal mistake. See, I spent the last 3 days buried in Chester County courthouse records, and what I discovered in those dusty basement files is about to flip this whole power game on its head. The deputy's scanning my property deed. Her confident smirk is starting to wobble. What happens next? Total war. Ever had an HOA target you? Drop your location below. This story goes nuclear. 6 months ago, I'm Marcus Reed, sitting in a Philadelphia law office, signing divorce papers that handed my ex-wife everything I'd worked for in 20 years of Navy service. The smell of stale coffee and her attorney's cheap cologne still haunts me. 20 years as a logistics officer, 2 deployments, and what do I get? A settlement check and the crushing realization that Linda had been planning her exit for years. The PTSD didn't help. Nightmares, hypervigilance, jumping at car backfires. She couldn't handle it anymore. Here's the thing about rock bottom. You either stay there or climb out. I took that $240,000 settlement and drove north until I found peace. A cabin on 12 acres in Chester County, Pennsylvania. Woods, quiet, no HOAs dictating mailbox colors. That's when I spotted the for sale sign. Old Mill Lake, 40 pristine acres that had been in the Hutchins family for generations. Eleanor Hutchins, 89, was moving to assisted living. Price, $180,000. Every penny I had left. But looking at that lake in the morning mist, ducks paddling around like they owned the place, I knew I was home. The closing was smooth. Eleanor kept apologizing for neighbors who used the lake sometimes. She said they seemed nice, always waved, but she never gave formal permission. I was just too polite to tell them no. I should have paid attention to that. Day 1 in paradise. I'm having my first peaceful morning in months. Coffee steaming in the crisp air, watching sunrise paint the water gold. The sound of loons calling, smell of pine needles warming in the sun, exactly what my rattled nerves needed. Then gravel crunched in my driveway. White Escalade. Pristine. Never seen a dirt road it couldn't complain about. Out steps Brenda Whitmore, and I immediately recognized the type who's never heard no applied to her personally. Tennis whites costing more than my monthly disability check. Physics-defying blonde hair, and a smile that could foreclose on your grandmother. "You must be the new owner," she chirps, marching across my lawn like she owns it. "I'm Brenda Whitmore, president of Millfield Estates HOA. We need to discuss the lake situation. The lake situation, like my legal property, is a problem needing solving." "What situation?" I ask, setting down my coffee. Military instincts kick in. Assess threat, identify objective, plan response. She produces a folder. Of course she has a folder. Our community has used Mill Lake recreationally for 15 years. Fishing, boating, our annual regatta. It's quite established. Established by who? By custom. Tradition. Her smile brightens dangerously. Mrs. Hutchins never minded. She understood property ownership comes with community responsibilities. That's when I realize what I'm facing. This isn't about lake access. It's about power. A woman who's built her identity around controlling others and their property. And she just hit a guy who spent 2 decades dealing with entitled officers who thought rank meant ignoring protocols. "Ma'am, I appreciate the welcome, but this is my property. If your community wants access, we'll need proper agreements." The smile holds, but something cold flickers behind her eyes. "Oh, you'll find we already have our agreements. Historical use creates certain rights." She hands me a business card. Real estate agent, naturally. Think about it. I'm sure we can work something out benefiting everyone. Gravel sprays as she backs out. I'm left holding her card, tasting the bitter residue of instant confrontation, wondering what I've stepped into. The next morning, I wake to the sound of boat engines on my lake. 3 pontoon boats full of Millfield residents, fishing poles out, coolers open, acting like they own the place. The smell of sunscreen and entitlement drifts across the water. I walk to my dock. "Excuse me, this is private property." A guy in a polo shirt waves dismissively. "Relax, buddy, we've been coming here for years." That's when I realized Brenda Whitmore had just declared war on the wrong veteran. The pontoon boats became a daily invasion. Every morning at 7 a.m. sharp, the rumble of outboard motors would shatter my peace like an alarm clock from hell. These weren't quiet fishermen respecting nature. These were entitled suburbanites treating my lake like their personal country club. I tried the polite approach first. Posted private property signs along the shoreline. Within 24 hours, someone had torn them down and dumped them in my garbage can. The metallic clang of the lid slamming shut echoed my growing fury. That's when Brenda escalated to legal warfare. Tuesday morning, I'm replacing torn signs when a certified letter arrives. Law firm letterhead, Pemberton and Associates, the kind of fancy downtown Philadelphia firm that charges $500 just to answer the phone. The expensive paper felt thick between my fingers, weighted with threats and money. Prescriptive easement claim, the letter declared. They were claiming my lake belonged to them because they'd been trespassing long enough. A $50,000 lawsuit demanding I allow continued access or face court action. The smell of that legal stationery, all money and intimidation, made my stomach churn. But Brenda made her first fatal mistake. The letter included a detailed timeline claiming hostile use since 1998. I'd spent 20 years reading military contracts, and I remembered something from my logistics training about adverse possession claims. The key was that word hostile. It had to be used without the owner's permission. I drove straight to the Chester County Courthouse, a limestone building that reeked of decades of legal battles and broken dreams. The basement records room was a maze of filing cabinets and microfiche machines. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead like angry hornets while I dug through property records. Mrs. Hutchins had kept meticulous records. Property tax documents, insurance claims, and most importantly, handwritten diary entries from 1999 to 2018. Page after page of complaints about those people from the development using her lake without asking. But being polite, she'd never confronted them. The smoking gun was a 2003 insurance claim where she'd specifically mentioned neighborhood residents who swim and boat on the property with my reluctant permission. I remember learning in the Navy that permission, even reluctant permission, completely destroys any adverse possession claim. If the owner allows the use, it can never become hostile, no matter how long it continues. The old photocopier ground and wheezed like it was personally offended, but I copied everything. The taste of courthouse coffee, bitter as burnt motor oil, fueled my research. By Thursday, I had enough evidence to demolish Brenda's lawsuit. Friday morning, I hand-delivered my response to Pemberton and Associates. Their marble lobby screamed, "We charge too much for everything." The receptionist's face went pale when she saw my documentation package. My response included 47 diary entries proving permissive use, insurance documents referencing allowed activities, tax records showing Mrs. Hutchins maintained the boat ramp for community use, and a notarized statement from Eleanor's nephew confirming his aunt's too polite to say no personality. By Monday, Pemberton and Associates quietly withdrew the easement claim. Just a one-sentence letter stating they were reassessing their client's position. The smell of legal defeat is sweeter than victory cigars, but I should have known Brenda wasn't done. Women like her don't retreat. They regroup and attack from different angles. Tuesday morning brought 3 county vehicles rumbling up my gravel driveway: environmental inspector, zoning officer, and building code enforcement. Apparently my no trespassing signs constituted illegal commercial signage in a residential zone. My dock needed a wetland disturbance permit, and someone had filed an anonymous complaint about possible septic violations threatening water quality. The environmental inspector stepped out first, a thin guy whose cigarette-stained fingers clutched a clipboard like a weapon. The acrid smell of tobacco mixed with his obvious discomfort at being used as Brenda's attack dog. "Mr. Reed, we need to discuss some violations brought to our attention," he said, not making eye contact. That's when I spotted Brenda's white Escalade parked across the street, her blonde head visible through the windshield. She was watching her bureaucratic ambush unfold like a general directing artillery strikes. "What violations?" I asked, though I already knew this was harassment disguised as regulatory enforcement. "Anonymous tip about septic discharge into the waterway," he mumbled, clearly uncomfortable. "Need to take water samples. Inspect your system." I watched him pull out testing equipment, his hands shaking slightly. This wasn't a real inspection. This was Brenda coaching county employees to find problems that didn't exist. The morning air carried the sound of her car door opening as she climbed out to supervise her ambush. "Go ahead and test," I told him, stepping back. "You'll find the water's cleaner than most municipal supplies." But inside, I was calculating my next move. Brenda had just escalated from legal warfare to corrupting public officials. She'd crossed a line that would cost her everything. Time to remind her that Navy logistics officers don't just manage supply chains. We also know how to cut them off. The water samples came back pristine, of course. But Brenda wasn't done playing games with county bureaucrats. Within 48 hours, I had 3 more official notices plastered to my front door like legal confetti. Environmental violation for disturbing wetland habitat. Zoning violation for commercial use because my no trespassing signs were allegedly oversized. And the crown jewel, an emergency injunction request to halt all property modifications pending a comprehensive environmental impact study. The smell of fresh ink on government letterhead was becoming as familiar as my morning coffee, and twice as bitter. Thursday morning, I'm having breakfast when Chester County Inspector Patterson pulls up, with Brenda riding shotgun like she's his supervisor. She struts across my lawn in tennis whites, pointing at my dock with manicured claws. There, obvious damage to natural shoreline, she announces, and those signs violate residential zoning. Patterson, whose tobacco breath could kill mosquitoes at 20 paces, nods like a trained seal. Mr. Reed, multiple anonymous complaints about unpermitted waterfront modifications? Anonymous complaints from who? I ask, though we all know. Environmental protection sources, Brenda chirps, not hiding her smirk. That's my mini twist moment, watching Patterson's eyes dart to Brenda for approval, using her exact phrases from previous visits. This isn't enforcement, it's choreographed theater. She's been coaching county inspectors on what to find. But Navy logistics taught me something about supply chains. Every link has vulnerabilities. One phone call to Jake Morrison, my environmental consultant buddy from Pittsburgh, and I had professional testing equipment on site by dawn. Jake's gear made the county's kit look like a toy chemistry set. Professional pH meters, bacterial sensors, dissolved oxygen testing, the works. Morning mist rose from the lake like nature's perfume while he worked, that clean smell of untainted water. Marcus, this water's cleaner than most municipal supplies, Jake announced. pH perfect, 0 pollutants, excellent oxygen levels. Jake also reminded me of something crucial from his consulting work. In Pennsylvania, it's a one-party consent state for recording conversations. And false environmental reports to federal agencies? That's not just harassment, that's potential federal crimes when waterways are involved. So when Patterson returned Friday with Brenda supervising, my phone was recording in my shirt pocket. Environmental damage is obvious, Brenda declared, pointing dramatically. That structure disrupts natural water flow patterns. Could you show me exactly what damage? I asked innocently. The obvious disturbance to natural habitat, she stammered, realizing she was being recorded but unable to stop. Anyone can see the ecological impact. Patterson jumped in to save his puppet master. Visual inspection indicates potential habitat disruption requiring immediate mitigation. Based on what scientific assessment? Jake interrupted, stepping forward with professional credentials and pristine test results. Watching Brenda's face collapse was like seeing a house of cards in a windstorm. The morning breeze carried her desperation, expensive perfume mixing with panic sweat. This is harassment of county officials, she sputtered. No, ma'am, I said calmly. This is documentation of potential misconduct. I'll be filing ethics complaints with the county commissioner. Patterson went white. County inspectors coordinating with private citizens to manufacture violations? His job, pension, and career just evaporated like morning mist. By Monday, all environmental violations were quietly dropped. Zoning complaints mysteriously vanished. Patterson suddenly had more pressing cases requiring immediate attention. But Tuesday evenings brought Brenda's nuclear option. I'm grilling dinner when I spot surveyor stakes across the lake. Orange flags. Professional surveying crew working my property lines while Brenda supervised from her lawn chair. I grabbed binoculars and caught fragments of their conversation across the water. Creative boundary interpretation, one surveyor said. Establish potential adverse possession claims, the other replied. These weren't county officials. These were private surveyors hired to manufacture a property dispute. The evening air carried the mechanical whir of their equipment and Brenda's satisfied laughter. She'd moved from corrupting officials to outright trespassing with intent to commit surveying fraud. But here's what Princess Brenda didn't know. I'd installed trail cameras after the first round of harassment, motion-activated night vision, the kind that catch poachers and trespassers with crystal-clear evidence. By morning, I had 12 hours of footage showing Brenda directing surveyors to creatively interpret my property boundaries. The cameras caught everything, her instructing them to measure for potential adverse possession claims, discussing how to create good faith boundary disputes, even coaching them on what to include in their reports. The taste of victory was sweeter than my morning coffee as I burned the footage to DVDs. One copy for the Sheriff's Department, one for the State Surveying Board, and one for my growing evidence file. Brenda Whitmore had just committed criminal trespassing, conspiracy to commit fraud, and professional misconduct, all caught in high-definition video with audio. Time to teach this HOA queen what happens when you declare war on a Navy logistics officer. The trail camera footage was pure gold, but Brenda was about to prove that cornered animals get vicious. Within 48 hours of my trespassing complaint hitting the sheriff's desk, she launched suburban psychological warfare. It started with whispers. Neighbors who used to wave suddenly crossed streets when they saw me. The mailman, Roy, finally explained while delivering another certified letter. "Sorry, Marcus, but folks are talking," he said quietly, glancing around like Brenda might be hiding in my hydrangeas. "Word is you're having adjustment issues, PTSD stuff, maybe anger management problems." The morning air suddenly felt suffocating. Adjustment issues? Brenda's telling people you threatened her, says you're unstable, dangerous, military combat stress making you paranoid and aggressive. That calculating witch. She couldn't beat me legally, so she was assassinating my character instead. The acrid smell of Roy's truck exhaust mixed with my rising fury as I grasped her strategy. Anonymous Facebook posts appeared about troubled veteran disrupting peaceful community. The local newspaper ran "Waterfront dispute raises safety concerns," with quotes from longtime residents worried about aggressive behavior from newcomer with known PTSD issues. She'd weaponized my military service. The disability that earned my settlement was now evidence I was dangerous. The bitter taste of betrayal filled my mouth like old copper pennies, but Thursday morning brought her nuclear option. I'm having coffee when I hear vehicles approaching, a convoy, sheriff's cruiser, 2 unmarked cars, and Channel 6 news van. This wasn't law enforcement. This was a media execution. Deputy Martinez climbed out slowly, hand on radio. Behind him, news crew unpacked cameras while Brenda emerged like a talk show host making her entrance. She'd orchestrated this perfectly. Sheriff responding to her complaint, cameras documenting the dangerous veteran's arrest, neighbors gathering for the show. "Mr. Reed, need to discuss some allegations," Martinez called out. My blood pressure spiked, but military training kicked in. "Stay calm. Don't give them footage to use against you." "What allegations?" "Threats of violence. Mrs. Whitmore filed a complaint claiming you threatened her safety." Cameras rolled. Neighbors lined driveways like dinner theater. Brenda stood behind officers wearing her most convincing victim expression, dabbing dry eyes with tissues. When did this alleged threat occur? Tuesday evening, during the surveying incident. That's when I almost smiled. Because Tuesday evening, my trail cameras captured everything, including audio of our entire interaction. Here's the mini twist that changed everything. As I pulled out my phone to show the footage, Martinez's radio crackled. "Unit 47, we've got reports of Mrs. Whitmore's white Escalade speeding through school zones this morning. Multiple witnesses say she was using her phone while driving, yelling about some veteran." Brenda's face went white. She'd been so focused on destroying me, she'd forgotten about her own reckless behavior getting to the sheriff's station. "Ma'am, were you driving erratically this morning?" Martinez asked. "I was upset about the threats," she stammered, but now she looked guilty instead of victimized. I played my footage on the phone screen. Crystal clear video of Brenda directing surveyors, me politely asking them to leave. Her response, "This is community property and I'll survey it whenever I want." Not exactly terrorized victim material. Martinez's expression shifted as he watched. The news crew sensed the story flipping. Brenda's narrative crumbled like wet newspaper. "Ma'am, this shows you trespassing. Where's the threat you mentioned?" The threatening tone, his aggressive posture. But her performance was disintegrating. "I hear polite requests to leave your property," Martinez replied, "and you refusing." The news camera captured Brenda's complete meltdown. Her victim act dissolved while I stood holding video proof of her lies. The morning breeze carried the scent of her desperation. Expensive perfume mixing with panic sweat, fear that no amount of money can mask. But here's where it got interesting. A second sheriff's car pulled up, and out stepped Detective Sarah Chen with a folder thick enough to choke a horse. "Deputy Martinez, we need to discuss Mrs. Whitmore's pattern of false reports," Chen announced. "This is the 4th complaint she's filed against neighbors in 2 years, all subsequently proven false." Brenda's eyes went wide. She thought she was clever, but the detective had been tracking her harassment campaigns across multiple victims. The taste of justice was sweeter than victory cake. Mrs. Whitmore, you're under arrest for filing false police reports and harassment, Chen declared, producing handcuffs. The news crew captured every second of Brenda's arrest. Her perfect victim performance became a perp walk as neighbors watched their HOA queen get cuffed on live television. That evening, Channel 6 ran HOA President Arrested for False Reports Against Veteran. The footage went viral within hours. #Brenda Gets Handcuffed, trending on social media. But as I watched her lawyer post bail on the evening news, I knew this war was far from over. Desperate people with money and lawyers don't surrender. They escalate. Brenda's arrest should have been the end, but rich people with good lawyers make problems disappear. By Friday, she was out on bail, and by Monday, her attorney was claiming misunderstanding and community leader persecution. The charges would get reduced to a slap on the wrist. That's when I decided to dig deeper. If Brenda wanted legal hardball, time to see how her precious HOA held up under examination. I drove back to Chester County Courthouse, that limestone fortress where dusty records hide inconvenient truths. This time, I wasn't hunting property records. I wanted incorporation documents. Every HOA must file legal paperwork to exist, and papers leave trails. The basement archives reeked of mildew and forgotten bureaucracy, while I pulled corporate registration files. Millfield Estates HOA, incorporated 1998. Standard Articles of Incorporation, signed by developer William Whitmore, Brenda's father-in-law. Board of Directors, bylaws, everything looking legitimate at first glance. But something nagged me. 20 years of military logistics taught me that paper trails tell stories, and this felt incomplete. I cross-referenced state corporate registry with federal tax documents connecting dots. That's when I found it. Pennsylvania Department of State filing showed incorporation on March 15th, 1998, standard procedure. But the articles referenced common area transfers as detailed in attached Schedule A. Schedule A was missing. 3 hours hunting microfilm before finding the original filing. Page 1, Articles of Incorporation. Page 2, Board Structure. Page 3, Bylaws. Page 4 should have been Schedule A, detailing common area transfers from developer to HOA. Page 4 was blank. The crackling sound of old paper seemed to echo my heartbeat as reality sank in. My hands trembled, photocopying the incomplete filing. This wasn't minor paperwork error. This was legal catastrophe. Without Schedule A, the HOA never legally received common areas they claimed to manage. Every pool, playground maintenance agreement was based on property transfers that never happened. But it got worse. Much worse. Original developer William Whitmore filed bankruptcy in 2001. Court records buried in federal archives, assets liquidated, debts discharged, corporate entities dissolved. When he went bankrupt, unfinished property transfers became void. The Millfield Estates HOA had operated 25 years without legal authority to manage anything. Every fine collected, rule enforced, assessment levied. All ultra vires beyond their legal power. I sat in that courthouse basement surrounded by musty document smell and fluorescent humming, holding papers that could destroy 150 families' property values. The metallic taste of old water from the drinking fountain mixed with my growing realization of the nuclear bomb I'd discovered. Brenda's HOA didn't just lack authority over my lake. They had no legal authority over anything. 25 years of collected dues totaling nearly $3 million, all based on incomplete incorporation that was legally worthless. Homeowners had been paying for services they weren't legally required to fund. The common areas belonged to whoever held clear title, probably the bank that foreclosed on Whitmore's bankruptcy estate. The HOA's enforcement actions, lawsuits, their very existence as legal entity, smoke and mirrors built on missing paperwork. But here's the devastating part. Exposing this wouldn't just destroy Brenda, it would financially ruin every family in Millfield Estates. Property values would crater when buyers discovered amenities they were paying for didn't legally exist. Insurance claims would be voided. Title companies would refuse policies. I could end Brenda's reign with a single filing, but it would be nuclear option, irradiating an entire community of innocent people. The weight of those documents in my hands felt like holding live grenades. One wrong move and everything explodes. The question was, how much collateral damage was I willing to accept to stop one suburban tyrant? And could I find a way to use this discovery that destroyed Brenda without destroying everyone else? That night, I sat on my dock with a beer and those damning courthouse documents, watching sunset paint my lake gold while wrestling with nuclear-level moral complexity. The evening air carried barbecue smoke from across the water, families enjoying dinner, blissfully unaware their community was built on legal quicksand. I could destroy Brenda with one phone call to the state attorney general, but 150 innocent families would get obliterated in crossfire. There had to be a third option, some way to defuse this bomb that only hurt people who deserved it. My phone rang. Jake Morrison, my environmental consultant buddy from Pittsburgh. Marcus, saw the news about your HOA queen getting arrested. Thought you should know. I've been consulting on similar cases across Pennsylvania. These suburban power trips are epidemic. How similar? I asked, suddenly interested. HOA boards operating outside legal authority, financial irregularities, enforcement actions that wouldn't hold up in court. I've helped expose 3 in the past 2 years. The taste of opportunity was sweeter than my beer. Jake, what if I told you I found something that could blow up this entire HOA structure? I'd say you need the right team to handle it surgically. Nuke everything and you hurt innocent people. But with the right approach, you extract cancer without killing the patient. By Tuesday morning, I had my war council assembled. Jake drove over with briefcases full of case studies. Roy the mailman agreed to be intelligence source. 15 years delivering mail teaches you every neighborhood secret. Pete from hardware store offered his back room for meetings, plus local credibility from dealing with Brenda's harassment campaigns. The plan was elegant. Give Brenda a chance to resign gracefully and make restitution, or face complete exposure that would destroy her while offering the community legitimate governance. Here's what we know, Jake said, spreading documents across Pete's workbench. The back room reeked of motor oil and sawdust, the scent of honest work mixing with our plotting. The HOA has no legal authority, but that's fixable. Pennsylvania allows retroactive incorporation if certain conditions are met. Here's something most homeowners don't know. You can research any HOA's legal status through your state's corporate registry online. Just search the organization name and check if their articles of incorporation are complete and current. Missing schedules or lapsed filings mean they might lack legal authority for enforcement actions. What conditions for retroactive incorporation? I asked. Full financial disclosure, restitution for misappropriated funds, formal agreement from affected property owners, clean up the mess and start over legitimately. Roy leaned forward, weathered hands tracing property maps. Marcus, I've watched this neighborhood 15 years. Half these people are good folks trapped in Brenda's system. The other half enable her because it keeps property values up. So we give them a choice, Pete said, his mechanic's pragmatism cutting through legal complexity. Fix it easy way or face the hard way. Jake opened his laptop, fingers clicking across financial analysis software. I've been running preliminary numbers on HOA expenditures. There's $340,000 in questionable transactions over 5 years, payments to companies owned by Brenda's family, inflated contractor bills, unauthorized legal expenses. The rhythmic thrum of Pete's air compressor provided background while we planned 3-phase strategy. Phase 1, document everything and offer private settlement. Phase 2, if Brenda refused, expose financial irregularities to homeowners and offer legitimate reorganization. Phase 3, if the community protected Brenda, release everything publicly and let chips fall. Wednesday afternoon, I met Sarah Chen, the young public interest attorney tracking Brenda's harassment patterns. Her legal aid office smelled like fresh coffee and righteous determination, the aroma of justice brewing. Mr. Reed, what you've discovered is exactly the case we live for, Sarah said, reviewing courthouse findings. Ultra-virus HOA operations are civil rights issues, people paying for services they're not legally obligated to fund. But I don't want to destroy innocent homeowners. That's why this approach is brilliant. We offer them legitimacy while holding bad actors accountable. Pennsylvania Homeowner Protection Act allows communities to restructure under court supervision. By Thursday, our evidence package was complete. Financial forensics showing Brenda's self-dealing, legal analysis proving HOA's invalid authority, environmental assessments demonstrating no actual lake threats, and most importantly, detailed proposal for legitimate community reorganization protecting everyone except system abusers. The settlement offer was simple. Brenda resigns all positions, makes full restitution, provides public apologies, supports legitimate reorganization. In exchange, we wouldn't file criminal charges for financial irregularities or expose HOA's legal invalidity publicly. 72 hours to respond. Friday morning, I hand-delivered the offer to Brenda's house, a brick colonial costing more than most people's retirement. Morning dew on her manicured lawn caught sunlight like tiny diamonds, beautiful and artificial as her manufactured community. The crisp autumn air carried the distant sound of leaf blowers maintaining suburban perfection. She answered in silk pajamas and fury, face twisting when she saw the thick legal envelope. "What is this?" she hissed. "Your way out," I replied calmly. "Or your way down. Your choice." Watching her hand shake, reading our offer, was absolutely delicious. Brenda's response came exactly 71 hours and 59 minutes later, a middle finger disguised as legal letterhead. Her attorney's rejection was professionally worded, but essentially amounted to, "Go to hell," with billable hours attached. Mrs. Whitmore categorically denies all allegations and demands immediate cessation of harassment. Any further contact will be considered stalking and prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. The woman had chosen mutual destruction over graceful exit. Fine by me. But Brenda wasn't going down without a fight. Within 48 hours, she launched a desperate multi-front assault that made her previous harassment look like amateur hour. Monday morning, I'm having coffee when a Chester County Sheriff's deputy I'd never seen before shows up with a restraining order. Not Martinez. This guy was younger, nervous, clearly hand-picked for his willingness to follow orders without asking questions. "Sir, you're served with emergency protection from abuse order," he said, avoiding eye contact. "No contact with Mrs. Whitmore, no approaching her residence, no social media posts mentioning her name." The papers smelled like fresh ink and legal desperation. Brenda had forum shopped until she found a judge who'd grant her request without hearing my side. The typical abuser's playbook: use the system designed to protect victims as a weapon against your enemies. But that was just the opening move. Tuesday brought a private investigator to my ex-wife's apartment in Philadelphia. Linda called me that evening, her voice tight with anger. "Marcus, some sleazy guy in a cheap suit came around asking about our marriage. Wanted to know about your drinking problem and violent episodes. Offered me $5,000 cash for anything embarrassing." The taste of rage was metallic and hot. "What did you tell him?" "I told him to get off my property before I called the cops." "But Marcus, this woman is playing dirty, really dirty." The PI's visit was classic intimidation, fish for ammunition while sending a message that no one in my life was off limits. The acrid smell of burning bridges followed Brenda wherever she went. Wednesday brought the cyber warfare. Anonymous social media accounts started spreading rumors about my unstable behavior and history of threats against neighbors. Fake reviews appeared on veteran support sites claiming I was dangerous and shouldn't be around other vets. The digital assassination was surgical and vicious, but Thursday's move was pure desperation. Someone cut my dock lines overnight, not sawed, cut with bolt cutters, leaving my floating dock drifting toward the dam spillway like expensive driftwood. I woke to the sound of aluminum scraping against rocks, my stomach dropping as I realized the scope of sabotage. The morning mist rising from the lake couldn't hide the deliberate vandalism. This wasn't random, this was escalation from harassment to property destruction. The smell of wet metal and my own fury mixed in the dawn air as I waded into cold water to retrieve my dock. But here's where Brenda made a critical error. My security cameras had night vision. The footage was crystal clear. 2:47 a.m., Brenda's white Escalade creeping down my driveway with headlights off. Two figures in dark clothing emerging with tools. Faces clearly visible when they walked through my motion sensor floodlights like amateur burglars in a comedy sketch. Brenda herself wielding bolt cutters while some guy I didn't recognize acted as lookout. The audio picked up her whispered instructions. Cut them all. Make it look like wear and tear. Property destruction, criminal mischief, trespassing, conspiracy, all caught in high definition with audio commentary. The woman had just committed multiple felonies while providing her own narration. Friday morning, I called Detective Chen. "Sarah, remember how you said Brenda had a pattern of escalating behavior? Well, she just escalated to breaking and entering." Chen's response was immediate. "How good is your security footage?" "Good enough for prime time." "Don't touch anything. I'm getting a warrant." But Brenda wasn't done. Friday afternoon brought her nuclear option. Anonymous calls to the VA claiming I was armed and dangerous and threatening suicide. 3 VA crisis intervention specialists showed up at my door, their faces mixing concern with bureaucratic protocol. "Mr. Reed, we received reports you might be in crisis. Mind if we come in and talk?" The irony was suffocating. Brenda was using my own support system against me, weaponizing mental health services that were meant to help veterans. The smell of their clipboards and official concern filled my living room while I explained that someone was making false reports to trigger intervention. "Sir, we have to take these calls seriously," the lead counselor said. "Even if they're malicious, We need to document that you're stable. 2 hours of psychological evaluation later, they left with reports stating I was coherent, stable, and clearly the victim of harassment. But the damage was done. There was now a VA file documenting concerns about my mental state that would follow me forever. That evening, I sat on my salvaged dock watching sunset paint the lake red, thinking about escalation patterns and the point where harassment becomes something darker. The evening air carried the distant sound of sirens. Seemed like the whole county was on edge. Brenda had just crossed every line, burned every bridge, and committed enough felonies to send her to prison. But desperate people with money and connections don't go quietly into handcuffs. Time to find out exactly how far she was willing to fall. Saturday morning brought the sound every homeowner dreads, heavy machinery rumbling up your driveway at dawn. I stumbled out of bed to find a massive concrete truck, excavator, and crew of hard hats setting up like they owned the place. The diesel exhaust mixed with my confusion as I threw on clothes and ran outside. "What the hell is going on?" I shouted over the engine noise. The foreman, a thick guy with tobacco stains on his teeth, waved a work order. "Emergency septic system replacement. County Health Department says you got contamination threatening the water supply." My blood pressure spiked. "I never authorized any septic work. Says here it's a public health emergency. We got orders to dig up your system and install new one. 24-hour timeline." The paperwork looked official. County letterhead, health department stamps, emergency authorization codes. But something felt wrong. The morning air reeked of diesel fumes and bureaucratic manipulation as I realized Brenda had weaponized the entire county government against me. "I want to see the original complaint," I demanded. The foreman shrugged, clearly just following orders. "Lady, all I know is we dig where they tell us. You got a problem? Call the county." Watching a $30,000 excavator prepare to destroy my yard was like witnessing a slow-motion car crash. The metallic screech of tracks on gravel echoed my internal panic as I called Detective Chen. "Sarah, they're about to tear up my property based on false health department orders." "Marcus, slow down. What orders?" "Emergency septic replacement. Brenda somehow convinced the health department my system is contaminating the lake. Get me the work order numbers. I'll make some calls." But here's the mini twist that changed everything. While I was on the phone with Chen, Roy the mailman pulled up with his usual delivery. He took one look at the construction crew and his face went white. "Marcus, those aren't county contractors," he whispered urgently. "I know every municipal crew in Chester County. These guys are private, probably hired by the HOA. My stomach dropped. "You're sure?" "Positive. The real county crews have union stickers, different equipment. This is a setup." That's when I spotted Brenda's Escalade parked 2 blocks away, her blonde head visible through the windshield like a general watching her army advance. She'd hired private contractors with fake paperwork to destroy my property, probably planning to bill the HOA later as emergency community protection. "Stop work immediately," I told the foreman. "This is fraud." "Can't do that, buddy. Got county orders." "Those aren't county orders. You're trespassing with intent to commit property destruction." The foreman's confidence wavered as he looked closer at his paperwork. The morning sun caught the cheap printer quality of the fake county seals, the slightly wrong fonts, the authorization codes that probably led nowhere. "Shit," he muttered. "Bobby, shut it down. Something's not right here." Within minutes, Chen arrived with 2 patrol cars and a very unhappy county health inspector, the real one. The inspector took one look at the fake paperwork and started making angry phone calls. "This is identity theft, forgery, and fraud," Chen announced, handcuffs appearing like magic. "And whoever hired you just committed multiple felonies." But Brenda wasn't waiting around for arrests. By the time we looked up, her Escalade was speeding away like a white missile fleeing the crime scene, the smell of burning rubber mixed with diesel exhaust as she disappeared around the corner. "She's running," I told Chen. "Let her run. We know where she lives." The afternoon brought Brenda's final desperate move. A full-scale media blitz claiming I was a dangerous veteran with PTSD who'd threatened to poison the community water supply. She'd hired a crisis management firm that specialized in spinning scandals for politicians and celebrities. Channel 6 News ran her story as breaking news. "Local man under investigation for environmental terrorism." The footage showed my property with ominous voiceover about contaminated wells and veteran mental health crisis. They even interviewed concerned neighbors who were obviously paid actors. I'd lived here 6 months and recognized none of them. But here's where Brenda's desperation backfired spectacularly. The crisis management firm had given her talking points, but they hadn't done their homework. During the live television interview, she claimed I'd threatened to dump chemicals in the lake to kill fish and contaminate drinking water. Problem was, Mill Lake wasn't connected to any municipal water supply. Every house in the area had private wells. Her terrorism claims made zero sense to anyone who understood local geography. The evening news included expert commentary from environmental scientists, pointing out the impossibility of her accusations. Social media exploded with locals correcting her false claims. #Brenda Lies started trending as neighbors posted videos debunking her paid actors. By sunset, her media strategy had collapsed into public humiliation. The taste of her desperation was bitter and satisfying as I watched her credibility evaporate on live television. But the real knockout punch came at 9 p.m. when Detective Chen called. "Marcus, we found something interesting in Brenda's financial records. That crisis management firm? She paid them $50,000 from HOA reserve funds. Unauthorized use of community money for personal legal defense. Embezzlement, the final nail in her coffin." Monday morning would bring the reckoning Brenda Whitmore had been racing towards since the day she first trespassed on my property. Monday evening, 7 p.m. sharp, Millfield Community Center transformed into a coliseum. Word had spread through the neighborhood like wildfire. Emergency HOA meeting to address the veteran situation and Brenda's escalating behavior. Cars packed the parking lot, spilling onto nearby streets as 127 residents showed up for what everyone sensed would be the final showdown. The community center smelled like burnt coffee and nervous sweat. Folding chairs squeaked under the weight of angry homeowners while Amanda Torres from Channel 6 set up her news crew in the back corner. Detective Chen positioned herself near the exit with 2 uniformed officers, their presence adding electric tension to the already charged atmosphere. Brenda arrived fashionably late, strutting through the doors in her signature tennis whites, like she was attending a charity luncheon instead of her own execution. Her crisis management consultant, a slick guy in a $2,000 suit, whispered last-minute strategy in her ear while she took her place at the front table. "Ladies and gentlemen," Brenda began, her voice artificially sweet, "we're here tonight because an outsider is trying to destroy our beautiful community. This unstable veteran has threatened our safety, our property values, and our way of life." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Half the faces showed sympathy for their longtime HOA president. The other half looked skeptical, having seen too many contradictory news reports to buy her victim narrative completely. "I have documentation proving this man has repeatedly violated community standards, threatened residents, and attempted to steal common area property that belongs to all of us," she continued, waving a folder thick with fabricated evidence. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead like angry insects while Brenda launched into her prepared speech about community values and dangerous outsiders. Her consultant nodded approvingly at each talking point, probably billing $500 per nod. But then I stood up. "Mrs. Whitmore, may I address the community under homeowner comment rules?" Her confident smile flickered. She'd been hoping to control the narrative without giving me a platform, but HOA bylaws required open comment periods. "Of course," she said through gritted teeth. I walked to the front carrying a simple manila folder. No fancy presentation, no crisis consultant, just documentation and truth. The silence was so complete you could hear the heating system cycling and someone's nervous stomach growling 3 rows back. "Neighbors, my name is Marcus Reed. 6 months ago, I bought property here hoping for peace after military service and a difficult divorce. Instead, I found myself fighting an HOA that operates outside the law." I opened my folder, pulling out the incomplete incorporation documents that had started this whole investigation. What Mrs. Whitmore hasn't told you is that this HOA was never legally formed. The Articles of Incorporation filed in 1998 are missing Schedule A, the property transfers that would give this organization authority over anything. Gasps echoed through the room. Brenda's face went pale as communion wafers. "Furthermore," I continued, "financial analysis shows $340,000 in questionable expenditures over 5 years. Payments to companies owned by Mrs. Whitmore's family members, inflated contractor bills, unauthorized legal expenses." Sarah Chen stepped forward, her legal credentials adding weight to my accusations. "Ladies and gentlemen, I'm attorney Sarah Chen with Pennsylvania Legal Aid. Mr. Reed's research is accurate. This HOA has been operating ultra-virus beyond its legal authority for 25 years. The room erupted. Voices shouted questions, accusations, demands for explanations. Brenda stood frozen like a deer in headlights while her consultant frantically whispered damage control strategies, but I wasn't finished. "There's more. Mrs. Whitmore has committed multiple felonies in her campaign against me. False police reports, documented and prosecuted. Property destruction, caught on security cameras. Hiring fake contractors with forged county documents, witnessed by multiple officials. I played the audio recording from my phone, Brenda's voice clearly instructing vandals to cut them all, make it look like wear and tear. The sound of her own words condemning her filled the silent room like a judge pronouncing sentence. And finally, I said, producing bank statements, she spent $50,000 of your community dues on crisis management consultants to cover up her crimes. Money that belonged to all of you, stolen to protect herself. The consultant was already backing toward the exit, probably calculating how to distance his firm from this public meltdown. Amanda Torres directed her cameraman to capture every second of Brenda's collapse. "These are lies!" Brenda shrieked, but her voice cracked with desperation. "He's manipulating you. He's dangerous." That's when Jake Morrison stood up from the audience. "Ma'am, I'm a licensed environmental consultant. The water quality reports you claimed showed contamination. They were fabricated. This lake is cleaner than most municipal supplies." The dominoes fell faster than Brenda could catch them. Roy the mailman testified about her harassment campaigns. Pete from the hardware store described her attempts to bully local businesses. 3 other neighbors came forward with their own stories of HOA abuse. Detective Chen stepped forward as the testimony concluded. "Mrs. Whitmore, you're under arrest for embezzlement, filing false reports, property destruction, and conspiracy to commit fraud." The handcuffs clicked with finality that echoed through the stunned silence. Brenda's perfect facade crumbled completely as she was led away in front of news cameras and 127 witnesses. The community voted 89% to remove her from all positions. 94% approved hiring independent auditors and pursuing criminal prosecution. Justice tastes sweeter than victory cake. 6 months later, I'm standing on my rebuilt dock watching the sunrise paint Mill Lake gold. But this time, I'm not alone. The morning air carries the sound of children's laughter as families enjoy their Saturday morning fishing, the smell of coffee drifting from picnic tables where neighbors actually talk to each other instead of filing complaints. The immediate aftermath was swift and satisfying. Brenda pleaded guilty to embezzlement and filing false reports, receiving 2 years probation and $45,000 in restitution. Her real estate license was permanently revoked. The crisis management firm settled out of court to avoid fraud charges. And that fake contractor crew? Turns out they weren't licensed for septic work anyway. They got shut down by the state. But the real victory was what happened to the community itself. Within 30 days, Millfield residents elected a new HOA board committed to transparency and legitimate governance. The forensic audit recovered $290,000 in misappropriated funds, plus another $150,000 from insurance claims against Brenda's surety bond. Suddenly, the community had nearly $500,000 to spend on actual improvements instead of legal warfare. The new board's first act was establishing the Mill Lake Conservation Trust, with me as volunteer coordinator. We maintained the lake's pristine condition while allowing responsible community access. Property values actually increased once the legal uncertainty was resolved and buyers could trust they weren't inheriting Brenda's litigation time bomb. Every year now, we host the Truth and Reconciliation BBQ, a community celebration that replaced Brenda's exclusive regatta. The smell of grilled burgers and honest conversation fills the air while kids swim in water that's cleaner than most swimming pools. Veterans get free fishing licenses, and we've built an accessible pier for disabled community members. The Marcus Hutchins Veteran Scholarship, named after Mrs. Eleanor Hutchins, not me, provides $5,000 annually to military families pursuing higher education. It's funded by recovered HOA money that Brenda had been siphoning into her family's accounts. Watching the first recipient graduate last month with tears in her eyes made every moment of this fight worthwhile. But perhaps the sweetest victory was professional. My YouTube channel, Veteran vs. HOA, now has 127,000 subscribers and generates enough ad revenue to supplement my disability pension. Turns out people love watching bullies get their comeuppance, especially when it's done legally and ethically. The channel has helped dozens of other communities expose HOA corruption and fight back against suburban tyranny. I even remarried Sarah Chen, the attorney who helped me navigate this legal maze. Turns out fighting injustice together is excellent relationship foundation. She's now running for county commissioner on a platform of HOA reform and government transparency. The wedding reception was held right here at Mill Lake, with Roy officiating as licensed minister and Jake providing environmental consulting to ensure we didn't disturb any wildlife. The ripple effects continue expanding. Pennsylvania's legislature passed the HOA Transparency Act, requiring annual financial audits and public access to incorporation documents. I testified before the state committee, sharing lessons learned from exposing Brenda's fraud. 14 other communities have contacted me for advice on similar situations, and 3 more corrupt HOA boards have been dissolved using the playbook we developed. Brenda herself moved to Florida, where she works as a dental receptionist under her maiden name. No more real estate empire, no more suburban kingdom to rule, just filing insurance claims and answering phones for $14 an hour. The taste of her complete downfall is still satisfying 3 years later. The lake itself thrives under proper stewardship. Eagle pairs have nested in the protected shoreline for 2 consecutive years. The fishing has never been better. And every morning when I have my coffee on this dock, watching mist rise from water that's truly mine but shared with people who respect it, I remember why this fight was worth every sleepless night. Sometimes the system works, sometimes the little guy wins. Sometimes buying a lake and standing your ground changes everything for the better. If you're fighting your own HOA nightmare, drop your story in the comments below. Share this video with anyone dealing with corrupt authority, and hit that subscribe button. Next week, we're covering how one food truck owner defeated a city council conspiracy to shut down small businesses. Remember, bullies count on you being too tired, too broke, or too scared to fight back. But sometimes all it takes is one person willing to say enough and do the work to prove it. The lake is peaceful now. Justice tastes like morning coffee and sounds like children laughing.